Welcome, everybody, to video review here. I'm James Riley with the Goliath Historical Fencing Academy, and I'm here with Quoc.
Hello
Quoc,
there.
how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, Quoc, so hold on. When was the last time we did a video review?
It's been a long time.
Yeah, I think something like,
Last summer, because
yes,
the event was called Summer. Hot Sword Summer was the name of that event.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So, was that before or after you came for the intensive here?
Um, Summer. I want to say that was before.
That may have been just before. So like I think the intensive that we did last year was around July,
Mm-hmm.
maybe mid-July. So then uh maybe Hot Sword Summer happened sometime at the end of May, June-ish
Yeah,
time frame.
something like that.
Um so yeah, so it's been a while and we've done a lot of work since then.
Mm-hmm.
And you've how do you feel about the gains that you made, any improvement that you made in your fencing since, let's say, try and frame it in terms of the last time we did a video review.
Sure, sure. So, ever since the last time we had the review, I primarily was sort of fine tuning a lot of my techniques. Because I those techniques were still relatively new to me in a competition setting, right? I had done the drills a bunch, but actually putting them in a competitive um, context was newish at that time. And then since then, I've competed in a few more events, and with every event, I get a little bit better with these techniques. And then more recently, we've been sort of honing down in the tactical stuff.
Yeah,
So
right. So you're kind of living a progression, right? So, how we sort of experience the the philosophical framework initially and the key takeaways, but then also we're having to train our body, which is its own gargantuan set of tasks.
right.
Um, and then and sometimes it can be really dismaying because if your body just won't work, but you want to believe that you're thinking in a tactical way,
Mm-hmm.
um, or in a strategic way. Well, and that's sort of where we're ending up is strategic, right? So we've at this point we've not exhausted tactical application. We
Right.
certainly have there's certainly a ton of work to do in the domain of tactical application,
Right.
but your experience in developing the movement patterns and developing your ability to execute them in a timely way and in context where the movement pattern is required in the space of time it's required, right? Like as you've gotten better at that, the tactical game starts to open up a little bit. Do you feel like time slows down? That's an
Yes.
interesting way of thinking about it, right? So tell me
Yes.
more about that.
The well, before, if I'm like in the middle of a match, and there's like a hundred different ways a match can go, a hundred different ways I could read the opponent. Um, I don't really have enough time to like focus on any one thing. But over time, as I've been working with you, and we've been um, sort of honing in on these core tactics, um, I can like really quickly look at an opponent, see if they're strong or weak, and then I've got like maybe three or four things that I'm like prepared for and can execute. And in that sense, it's like I've like bought more time back.
Yeah, right. So that's huge. That's such a huge insight, is this idea that if you narrow the set of behaviors that you can expect your opponent to give you,
Hmm.
you don't have to pay attention to as much of the chaos of the fight, right? Of as much of the randomness of the fight.
Right.
And so then those things, they start to become more apparent earlier,
Hmm.
right? I mean, even just logically, it makes sense, right? Like if I'm looking for you to do certain things, I'm catching smaller and smaller cues earlier that suggest, well, there's that cue. Maybe if I didn't have this narrowed set, then that cue could mean any one of 100 things.
Hmm.
But because I know that this is the only thing that's reasonable for them to do in this moment, then I know that that cue is telling me it's option number one of the four things that he could choose to do.
Right.
Right. So because of that, you can see, and that'll happen subconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not, if you had that conversation with your head in your head with yourself, then you'd probably just get hit in the face and you wouldn't make it
Yeah.
very far in a fencing match. But it happens subconsciously, right? And so
Right, right. There's like a set number of reps that I end up doing. Like the more I compete, and the more of the same pattern that I see. Like if I step in and they still got their hand on their shoulder and I'm like close enough where I know I can fire this off before they can get anything out, then I just do that immediately.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, and that's really like, and then that's sort of the ultimate goal when it comes to sort of tactics, is that we're totally cutting out the middleman of intellectualizing and abstracting out what's happening, and that we've already trained our body to behave, you know. And this is one of the mistakes I think people make, is that they feel like, well, because the goal is just to get rid of the abstraction, right? Then they train in a way where they don't ever actually train with the abstraction as a training tool,
Mm,
right? And so that's hugely that 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 could be a hugely destructive method for developing, because if you're you, in order to say that this is the correct technique there, in order to frame it in your mind, it helps to say why this works in this moment. What are the considerations? Why doesn't it work in this moment? Even like, what are the
mm-hmm.
things that it loses to? All of that stuff, that has to be talked about, and that has to be mapped out and framed in a very particular way.
Right.
And yeah, the goal is to just teach your body to know all of those things in a deep way, right? In your, like, at almost a cellular level, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's misguided to say, well, if if it takes too much time to think about it, I should just not train in terms of thinking about it, right?
Mm,
Instead, you train slowly with the abstraction in mind, and you gradually over time. And that's another thing that we've worked on in a lot of detail over the course of the last year, maybe more so in the last year than in the prior year, which was the method of developing skills,
mm-hmm.
right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Uh, Boy, not really. I can't really put that into words right now.
Okay, so just talking about the idea that, when you first learn a movement pattern, you can't do it, right? First, you just have to like get to be able to do it, right? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
have to slow it down and say, okay, my shoulders tilted this way, or, I'm supposed to rotate my hips and my shoulders together. Um, and then once I do that, and once I can reliably do that, then I have to do it against someone throwing a cut at me. And then all of a sudden, like the moment they throw the first cut, it falls apart, right? Everything that you worked on, you say like, okay, I can do this reliably 100 times out of 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
One person throws one cut, and you're prepared. You're totally prepared for it. You're like, do this thing, right? Like,
Right.
do this thing that you've shown that you can do 100 times,
Mm-hmm.
right? Against this cut, and just, you don't even have to time it right. You could already start there, and for whatever reason it falls apart. And so that's one thing that, whether or not you realize it, we paid a lot of attention to what you should do.
Mm,
And I think maybe the reason that you haven't thought about that or thought through that too much is because what will happen is, often you'll give me a piece of video and I'll look at it as the feedback, right? And so then I'll assess the video and say, well, this is where you kind of need to be. This is what you need to be doing,
right.
right? And so it goes from, try and do this in a fencing bout. When you see him do this, try and do this. It goes from that to, you know what, you just need to do steps forward and back 5 minutes. Like, that's what you're doing. Like, no more. No, like, almost like, don't even fence, right?
Mm,
Just do forward and back, uh
mm-hmm.
5 minutes a day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is, if I can't execute the technique when there's nobody around, right? How could I possibly execute it the moment somebody sticks their sword in my face?
Right, right. And just to be clear, I said like almost to the tune of don't even fence. What I'm not saying is I'm not saying don't fence. Everyone should fence all the time, whenever they want to fence. But it's like the kind of work that you're doing when you're doing hard work, that 5 minutes a day that I talk about,
Mm-hmm.
right? That should almost kill you, right? That 5 minutes a day that you're doing to like improve yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that you should walk away from that exhausted, right? And sometimes you want to experience that in a fencing bout,
Mm.
right? And other times you just want to experience that with the swinging, you know, uh, slip bag, or the HEMA version of the slip bag that you have in your house. The What is it called?
It's so it's a makeshift sort of swinging pell, but it really is just some like really heavy rubberized dog toys that I hung up on a tree.
Right. It's just, yeah, it's a slip bag. I mean, for those in the audience watching this later, just buy yourself a slip bag. They're $40. They're leather. They're filled with sand or whatever. You can get hit with it in the head. It feels fine. And so, but one of the things that you've been doing, well, explain what you've been doing with that.
So I use it for a couple of things. So I've got two parts of it. I've got like a circle ring part, and then I've got like a heavier black part. But for the past couple of weeks, I've been using it primarily to help me with my footwork. You sent me some videos. You were just like practice your wage, so I took that seriously. I was like every day, multiple times a day, between 2 to 3 minutes, because it is really exhausting to do that.
Mhm.
Just going back and forth, and then using the swinging of the pel to help with the timing aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so vage, right? For those of you who don't know what wage means, vage. Quoc is American from Florida, so he's going to pronounce it like an American. But vage. So, having a stable base, but being able to move in and out of a stable base to a stable base, and doing that super explosively.
Hmm.
There are a lot of reasons why we would need to do that. You know, one of the reasons is that we need to take a moment of weakness. We'd be able to shoot into a moment of weakness. That's an awesome ringtone on your phone. It makes me so
It's
happy.
supposed to be annoying, right?
It just reminds me of playing video games when I was
Oh,
7. So,
yeah. What my wife calls me, it'll play like really cool chiptune music.
so yeah, but then also just like getting out of distance
Hmm.
immediately, right? And like not just getting out of distance and running away, but like pulling distance into a stable base so that you can take maybe and plow or something, and
Hmm.
then immediately take back your turn because you didn't overshoot your center of mass backwards.
Yes, yeah. So the taking back my turn part is the probably the biggest thing that it unlocked for me was the ability to, because before I would run away, reset, and then have to figure out a way to get back in. But now, uh, as I go to retreat and the opponent advances, and I see that they're advancing in a weak way, I just immediately fly forward.
Right, exactly, because you're spring loaded for it, and also, when you step that way, you're basically loading up the back foot to take all of the weight, so that if you need to shoot forward immediately, you can, right? Um, or so that's been really awesome. Go buy yourselves a slip bag, guy. We'll get right into it. So tell me about this tournament real quick.
This was a tournament that was held in Atlanta, Georgia. The main head honcho that was holding it was Paul Groover, who's been competing and training with Keith Cotter Riley for the past couple of years. This was Paul's first tournament that he put on. His rule set document was like about a page and a half, which I really like, and the rules were simple. It was basically the unlimited time, first to 6 points. Uh, Deep target were 2 points. After blow mine is 1 point. So there were sub matches that could end in like 30 seconds, right? 2, 4, 6, done. And then there were matches that would slog on for a long time.
Sure, sure. Nice. Yeah, it looked like a lot of fun. I really had a good time enjoying the highlight reel that you put together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you you seem to prioritize like entries into that highlight reel seem to prioritize a lot of the really important aspects or a lot of the things that I personally find to be like really, really important aspects and qualities of anybody's fencing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we seem to share perspective on what like really good fencing looks like. Um, and so like every single exchange in that highlight reel, I was like, man, rock star, like so good. Of course, we're not going to watch
No,
your highlight reel today
no,
because that would just be a lot of talk about how awesome you are.
no. The
And
the highlight reel was made for entertainment purposes, right?
I mean, you could actually anyone would benefit from watching it because there's so much that's good about it, right? It's not that highlight reel is not a highlight reel of things that seem to go your way,
Mm,
right? And I often find when I'm watching a competition video that some of the exchanges just seem to go one way or the other. And occasionally I'll see exchanges like that in a highlight reel, right? Which will be bewildering to me because I'll be saying to myself like that was not like you know like I'm not understanding what was so beautiful about that moment, right? Like it just I don't it just seemed to have gone your way. Maybe it shouldn't have, right? And maybe to give people the benefit of the doubt, maybe there are details that I'm missing, which is all could always be true, right? Details about the
right.
moment, details about their, stuff that I couldn't see through the physical manifestation of the fencing, right? Because you know, we've all been in a fencing bout where we've caught our training partner not paying attention,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or we just have them so much on the back foot psychologically that we can get away with doing things that would be really unreasonable in other instances, right?
Right.
Um, but but that being said, like your highlight reel, like every entry into it, from my perspective, for the most part, and I can't even think of any examples off the top of my head, but uh, for the most part, I felt like you earned your hit from the Sufechten all the way through the Krieg, and then you uh, earned your withdrawal as well, right? You earned not getting hit,
Mm-hmm.
um, which you might appreciate when we do the intensive this year, and we run the tournament rule set that um, you remember Bob.
Yeah, Bob Powers.
Yeah, well, so you would have seen him online anyway, but you met him last year. I think
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
around for a lot of what we did. So he actually just came up with a rule set that really blew me away.
Mm,
So I mean, I'm really, really encouraged by what he was able to put together. But one of the aspects of the rule set that is going to be um, a new addition is the idea of we're going to assess quality of withdrawal, notwithstanding after blow, right?
okay.
So you're not encouraged to afterblow. Like it won't score you any extra points because you afterblow, but you will lose quality if you don't mitigate an afterblow.
Right.
Notwithstanding whether or not they throw it, right?
Yeah.
And that might be a hard pill to swallow for some people because it's not like being able to identify qualities of withdrawal as being
Mm,
good or bad is not something that people train necessarily very often, right? But
right.
then of course this tournament isn't for just anybody, right? This tournament is for people who have been training the way that you have, right, for the last several years. And so you don't need anyone to tell you what a good withdrawal is. Um,
Right. And depending on your source, you might not care about the withdrawal part. Maybe your source doesn't say anything about withdrawing. It just
right.
says hit them.
If you're looking from a human perspective, right? If you're saying like, well, I'm tournaments are just a way for me to engage with the sources of swordsmanship that I'm studying, the historical sources of swordsmanship that I'm studying, then maybe you don't. But that's also true for all tournaments, right? Like no tournament rule set is designed to cater to all approaches to HEMA and or swordsmanship,
Right.
right? So for that reason as well, we just like don't care. Like okay, like don't if you don't worry about withdrawal, then our game probably won't be a fun game for you. Or it might be a fun game for you. You might learn that that's the kind of game you want to play alongside the normal game that you play.
Right.
All right, we're going to get to work here now. So, okay. So you got 3 matches here, eh?
Right.
What were the outcomes of the matches?
The first match, Ben won. It was a close fight. The second match, I won, also a close fight, although I had to fight really hard for it. And then the third match, I was gassed out, and he won pretty easily. I think
Okay.
if you just looked at the timestamp, you could probably tell.
Yeah, well, yeah, it looks like, the first match went on for them. I mean, this is a lot of fencing. Um, the first match went on for, a reasonable amount of time. The second match went on for forever by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last match was shorter than
Right.
both of the first two. So, yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. And it's funny because you had definitely trained your repeated sprint ability
Mm-hmm.
with your Vage training,
Right.
right? But you didn't train your general
No, which I've
glycogen
changed.
stores,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I've so ever since this, I have actually ramped up, more cardio training.
So what do you do now?
Every morning I wake up, I immediately do 50 kettlebell swings. Um, and then throughout the day, I will randomly do jump roping for a few minutes at a time.
That's great.
And,
Yeah.
and then a few times a week, I will go for a 1.2 mile run just because that's the convenient route.
Hmm.
And then I've been timing myself to figure out, to how to get those numbers down.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and suggest that if you're interested in sort of developing your so if you're worried about gassing out, right? So like in the match, you didn't demonstrate that you gassed out from a lot of sprinting.
Mm,
So when I say sprinting, I mean 100% output, right?
right, right.
So 100% output or 110% output, we can all do that for some, 50 to 100 seconds or something like that. Um, depending on where you are in your training. Normal people can probably go for like 25 seconds at max output, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't, it's very, very rare that someone can go over 100 seconds at max output. Um, and then like when you get there, basically lactic acid is flooding your body and you can't even move anymore,
Mm,
right? And like you start to see in black and like I've literally experienced this, right? You start to see in black and white, you know, um, time starts to slow down.
yeah, which I don't ever push myself that hard.
Well, and you shouldn't need to because in fencing, the most sprinting you're ever going to do is like 5 to 7 seconds, right? Like that's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sprinting. 5 to 7 seconds is a tremendous amount of sprinting, right?
Yeah.
Um, typically, an exchange, there's going to be a small burst of 1 to 2 seconds, right? Um, so that's not going to be a problem. Uh, Having the repeated sprint ability, so that like every time you do one of those bursts, by a minute, 2 minutes in, you're not starting to slow down or sort of have diminished output during those sprints. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to develop your recovery time and you do that with the kind of training that you're talking about. But if we're talking about over the course of 15, 20 minutes, right? If we're saying like, I just want to make sure that I have enough energy stores in my body so that if I'm operating under my lactic threshold,
Mm,
right? So if the way that I'm thinking about it is like, if I'm running at a pace that I could keep up for as long as I have the energy in my body for,
right.
right? Then the question is how long can that last? And you know that's kind of the difference between a normal person and a marathon runner, right? So like a normal person might be able to run for 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes if they're sort of naturally cardiovascularly fit.
Mm,
Um, Obviously, a marathon runner, someone who runs, I know of people that run 100 miles,
yes.
300 miles in a race. Like that's a lot, I guess. Beyond, I don't even have the frame of reference for that, but
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like, you know, what you're where that comes into play with regards to HEMA is that like if you're doing a tournament, then we're talking about, and especially if you're in the elimination bracket and your things are moving along quickly, like
Mm-hmm.
that could gas you out pretty quickly, you know, after a while. And this is an 8 minute set of matches, and presumably you didn't have a tremendous amount of recovery time right before this.
No, it's
Uh,
about a. Oh, my video went out. That's fine. No, it was a 1 minute rest in between each of the match.
right. And then what was the rest time between the, we'll say, the previous round of eliminations? And
It depends. They were basically as soon as they could find you a spot in the elims, you were fighting again. So it could have been a minute. It could have been less.
right. So I guess what I would say is, if you're interested in developing this aspect of your cardiovascular fitness, then the best way to do it is to do 3 times a week or more. We'll say maybe 3 to 4 times a week might be pretty reasonable. Um, of 30-minute plus steady state cardio exercise. And that would be lower than lactic acid threshold. So you wouldn't want to um, do the kind of exercise that would get your heart rate so high that you had to stop after 5 minutes or so. Like you would want to keep your output down to where you could maintain the whole exercise for 30 plus minutes.
Right.
um, and so I would recommend that, and like as the best way to prevent yourself from gassing out because you've been fencing all day at a tournament.
Right.
Um, so something to consider, and I understand not everyone has it in their day to be able to do that, and you'll probably get benefit from just 2 times a week, uh, if you could. But for me, I use the bike. I have an assault bike that I use. Assault
Mm-hmm.
bike it's like um, a bilateral exercise because just a regular stationary bike is pretty unilateral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people use elliptical or rower or just a treadmill, or if you can run outside. For me, it's winter right now, so running outside is not an option. When it's summer, I will often run, and I'll just do like 3 miles, 3 to 5 miles,
Wow.
and that gets me. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it is a thing. But remember, and for this type of output, you're not looking to achieve any sort of result other than, did I maintain an elevated heart rate for the 30 plus minutes,
Right.
right? So you don't have to worry about, am I running 8 miles an hour? Am I running 10 miles an hour? You don't have to worry about any of that, right? You run whatever you can run for 30 plus minutes. And then instead of trying to get your time down, you try and get your, um, distance covered up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So anyway, all right. So let's get into this bout. We'll watch. You said you lost the first one, but it was close. We'll watch the first bout.
Okay.
So I like that. Let's look at here. Let's look at in slow motion. Can you see this okay?
Yes. Yes. I can see it just fine.
All right. So I like your choice on that left over. Like you're in right plow for a moment. It looks like you might be inviting some kind of action here. Nice strong right plow forward. And then you telegraph with your body before your sword starts coming forward. You see that?
Yes.
So we'll watch it one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And then your foot lands before the sword, right? So
Right.
if we just focus attention on really making sort of sword first, pulling us into, in fact, I bet you I can pull, let me see if I can't pull something up. Uh, I can show you like a version of me doing this where that's a consideration that I'm making. So can you see how the sword is leading the action?
Yes, yes.
So sword moves first, sword moves first,
Right,
right?
right.
So just training that, just doing 5 minutes a day of that for a
Okay.
while, is just going to make it, because you made the right tactical choice in that moment,
Right,
right? It was just because you started by telegraphing with your body, and there was a moment of hang time of your sword in this sort of Kran, vom Flugelkran, out in front of you, which is
right.
just, I mean, I'm not picking on the posture. It's just a staging platform for your cut.
Yeah,
But the problem is you show that, right? So if you had just gone sword first with the cut instead of being here, right? Then your body's still going to make it there on time, but he won't be gone.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So you can put that in your notes as a thing to consider making just a habitual practice. Continue. Nice Vage posture. Excellent. Excellent distance commitment.
We don't see the video anymore.
Oh, oh, of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I'm gonna have to go back. So for this, I'll just show that one more time. So we're in plow. We stage with the body. We stage the cut. And then if you had gone sword first rather than doing this with your body first, then you arrive at the same place in the right time, but he's not gone. Do you see how he's out of distance of the cut now because your sword was late getting there?
Right.
So one more time. If you go sword first here, then he doesn't have the cue to leave before that cut lands.
Right.
All right, so moving on. Yeah, so I mean, I don't mind the striation there. I think it was perfectly reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe if the striation doesn't land, I might commit on the Shisen after. So we cut Streisand. So now I'm here. So you kind of reach with the cut,
Right.
but if you had lifted your hilt a little higher, targeted the chest, and actually shot with the footwork, then you land a thrust there too.
Mm.
Now I don't know. You may well have just stopped because you knew that the cut the shortage unter landed. So like that's fine. Definitely not worried about that. But just if you think about, look at the nature of this bind and the nature of your structure. You can be thrusting through and controlling his sword in this moment, right? So
Right.
because his weak is forward, so his weak is there for you to thrust into.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. I do like keeping the chase up until well after the halt's called. Yeah. So the plow is good there. If you're going to be in plow, you might as well just go all the way, go all in on the plow. So because you kind of do that.
What do you mean to go all in? Like
I'll
all the
show
way
you. I'll
down?
show you. Yeah, and point all the way forward. Like right
Right.
here,
Yeah.
your point is high. Your hands are center of your chest,
Mm-hmm.
and your torso it's not totally square. It's rotated to your left slightly,
Right.
but I might rotate further, get my point down, really close off my left side. So like what this posture that you're in, it gives him an attack to each side,
Mm.
right?
Right.
And so what he can do is he can feint to one side and chase the other, and you're going to have to respect it.
Right.
Whereas if you come to plow, you get your point forward, right? You're exposing your right shoulder, but that's the only thing you're exposing, because if he feints left, you don't have to respect that at all, right?
Okay.
And so now when he's feinting left, you know that you catch the feint indes.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And you either shoot or you slice into it, depending on the distance, or you just cut over as he pulls his hands back to cut around to the other side. So really, it just makes that feint. If you just close this all the way, put your point in his face, right? He has to respect your left side, and tactically you're in a more advantageous position, and then also like you're structurally you're stronger,
Mm-hmm.
right, to start the riposte.
Right.
So now we're back in Spreckfester. Huh. So he made you bite on something there.
Yes.
It's hard for me to see what caused you to.
Uh, the way so Ben is my competitor there. The way he moves is very chaotic.
Yeah.
So it is really hard to try to narrow down exactly which side he's trying to
As
move
yeah,
to.
yeah, because I'm sure. I mean, his sword moves really fast, right? And so like, because he didn't even show any leftover at all on that, but you're
Mm,
just like sitting there thinking like, well, like who knows what the hell is about to happen, right? Like,
right.
so yeah, I mean, I don't really have an answer for that. I just something to note, right? Like, okay, that's interesting. And maybe if I'm fencing him, maybe I'm doing the same thing, just
Mm,
trying to like what the hell is he doing? What the hell is he doing?
yes.
So that was good. Yeah, I like that one. That's just that's just clean. Uh, threaten the set. You catch the emotion. Work
Mm-hmm.
indes. Um, were you sure that you hit, or because I see that often after those Zex, you will not, like, sometimes you will withdraw, right? Like in the highlight reel, you left a lot of those in there where you hit like nice clean Zek and you were out, like the way that I try and fence, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Other times I'm seeing like maybe I didn't hit them and maybe I'm going to close the line with some kind of
It it depends on how my opponent responds. If they respond in the way that I think the opponent could, or the judge could misconstrue as them hitting me, right?
mhm,
Then I just continue attacking,
mhm,
right? Because
yes,
I'm like, I don't know if the judge thinks that they saw my opponent hitting me, so I need to get another hit in just to be sure.
right, or at least get a get a strong position and like
Right.
blow through or crush whatever hitter they're going to send my way,
Yes.
right?
I mean, there are hits that are unambiguous as to, who hit and who didn't. But in an instance like this where, you know, we're close, both of us are hitting really fast, and his response to me is just to hit me.
Sure. Right, 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 right. So, I mean, it's, closing the line is not a bad idea. Like, y- you know, this is basically good structure. Your torso is a little upright, for my taste here. If we're really trying to collapse structure, then I
Mhm.
would want you to have 135 degrees with the floor.
Okay.
Here it looks like you have 90, you know, but also like we talked about already, the chaos of the exchange before. But that, as far as just an exchange, like that for me, that's like a perfect exchange, right? Provocation, uh, catch an instance of motion, work index to hit to the nearest opening, and then it's just a question of how you conclude. For me, I'm going to withdraw on that 9 times out of 10, but that's because I'm not worried about what group of people are observing the fight. For me, I'm worried about like me and my training partner. Do we both know what happened? And even in a sense, sometimes I'm not even worried about my training partner. Like I know what I did there. I know whether I did it well or poorly. I'm taking that home with me, right? Cool. So we'll continue. I like that you come to plow. Look at that. Like, get your hands in on that side. That's also, they didn't give you the hit for that. I felt like the hit was there. Did you feel like the hit was there?
They counted as a double, and I think it was close enough where it was basically a double.
Okay. So that would have been a good time for what?
Just to shoot in.
Or barring,
Yeah.
right? So once you see that once you see that he's got his point forward and low, and he even showed the stration. Um, but like right
Right there.
here,
Yeah.
you know. So like
I mean,
now
it's
it's got
interesting that he does that. I mean, clearly, there was no way he was close enough, and it wasn't threatening. I didn't take it as a threat.
sure, no, for sure. But the way that I'm looking at a lot of those is like, what is this? How am I assessing like where my opponent's frame of mind is tactically, right? And if we look back to or we think of that moment where he showed that stration, now look at the bind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you bar on that, you get the slice for free for sure,
Mm.
right? If not the thrust,
Right.
right? Because he already kind of betrayed himself and so as soon as he's giving you that, then you're like, okay, I'm watching for point low here, right? I'm watching for point low, and now I'll bar, but I'll do it in the vor.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe you catch the strikes and indes. Like that's a hard ask, because especially if it's coming out of nowhere, you don't know that you're going to see it. But that's also a cue. Like, okay, now I'm going to watch for the staging of that rather than the action. And then I'm going to shoot behind the barring and not look for the hitter, right? But instead look for the slice, or maybe I get the wind to plow and I hit on. I get to set after that. Like fine, whatever. Or I seek with the short edge, right? Because so, and then I'll just say here, especially given what he's moving around so erratically, and it's really really hard to narrow him down. They call these, so like boxers have a name for this type of fighter. They're called awkward.
Mm.
Um, well, but I
Is
mean,
that a
and
real
it's
thing?
It's totally a real thing, and they do
Okay.
not mean it as an insult or some kind of weird pejorative. Like they mean like when they're saying like who's going to beat who, they're like, I don't know, he's an awkward fighter, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And all that means is that their timing and their rhythm, the way that they stage their behaviors is very very hard to grab hold of,
Right.
right? And so that's what we mean when we say awkward. And so in this way, Ben, your opponent in this match is a very awkward fighter, right? But how do you deal with an awkward fighter? One of the things that you do is you put them up against the ropes, right? You get them up against the ropes. They have limited, their diminished capacity to move,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what you might have thought about here is once you got them up against the ropes, here, now, right? So right now, where's his sword? So you could set up a slicing here, right?
Right.
So instead of trying to Shisen this, right? Because you'll never Shisen, because look at where his hilt is.
Right. And then
But
this is quite a bit of distance to try to cross with the Shisen as well.
well, it is. I mean, your sword is pretty far forward, and he's going to move very fast. So it's every when we say quite a bit of distance, it's hard to even say that, because every two fighters is going to be a different way of assessing the same distance,
Mm.
right? So like, um, you could step into him, right? Because he doesn't really have anywhere to go. Um, you won't Shisen against him on this configuration, regardless of the distance, because of the position of his hilt. So his hilt is closing off any Shisen. But because his point is high, right? Because his point is kind of high like this, so his point isn't forward. If his point was out here, then even at this distance, the Shisen is there, because look at where your elbows are, right? So if his point is here, and then all you have to do is extend your hilt. Oh no. All right. I've screwed it all up. All right. Anyway, moving on. So if you wanted to, I guess what I'm saying is if you wanted to and just shoot in behind a slice almost, right? Or like an ober with the intent of making him sniff his sword, right? Rather than an ober with the intent of controlling his point and then shooting and then hitting set through it. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Is it like a slicing off on his blade?
Not on his blade. No, 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 no. Sorry, I'll pull up I'll pull up another one. So yeah, you can kind of see it here. Do you see how I'm kind of pushing his sword into him here?
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right, so hold on. So right there.
So this.
There. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah. So normally, I mean, the way I've been doing it is that I've just been literally pushing their hands high and back, but I haven't pushed their hand and their sword into them.
Right. Yes. Yes. So you definitely want to consider adding that to your repertoire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to consider um, being able to, if you see someone standing like this in this vom Flugelkran,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like then you just think about just a Bleiben, like a Bleiben to the face, right? So if I'm going to Bleiben to the face, if their sword's not there, great, I get an Ober to the face. But if their sword is there and they make a cover where their point is high, and they're basically making the cover with the strong of their sword, right?
Right.
So if we think about what the texts say about, if we think about what the texts say about being strong versus going high with the hilt, right? So the texts make a distinction. If he parries strongly and his point goes wide, then you go to the other side, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then they say, or if he parries high with the hilt, if he lifts his hilt to push the sword out of the way,
Right.
right? Then you do the slicing or you do a Zek or whatever, right? Depending on what the play is. And so
Gotcha.
they make that distinction. So if you think about, if I go to Bleiben and you keep your hands at chest level, but you're still parrying with the strong of the blade, right? Then
Right.
you just have collapsed structure. It's just a parry and cron,
Right.
right? Now, your hands aren't so high that they're blocking your face. And so because they're not high, they're not extended. So I can't control them the way that I would with a hand trucking.
Mm.
But slice and hand trucking are distinct. They're two different line items in the Zedal among the 17 Hauptstück. Slice is one, hand trucking is another. And so if their hands aren't extended, their elbows aren't away from their torso, if they're pairing with the strong of their blade, then you still slice the same way. The slice is just getting structure and then using your body to control them. That's what a slice is, right?
Right.
A slice is putting the edge on them and using the motion of your center of mass to push them around physically. And that could be their hands, or that could be their sword, and then you slice in at the neck,
Mm.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when we say slice in at the neck, maybe what we mean is, I'll pull up the video again. All right. This time instead. Can you see this okay?
Yep.
If I cut and I see that he's going to plow, I can just
That's
I can
Zucken.
just observe the plow and Zucken immediately. The reason that people go to this sort of crowning posture is actually to defend against, unless we go to slice.
You see that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's just watch that again in slow motion to really get a sense of what we want to do against these people who like to, it's people who like to take with the strong of their blade with their hands at chest level.
Right.
Right. So I went to, I just did a regular ober. He came to plow, but he's in that crawny kind of an action. So he's basically mitigating the Bleiben and the cut around and the Zucken at the same time.
Right.
Right. So because he's doing that,
we go to slice.
And then from there, once you push him around, you don't even have to settle. You don't even have to settle for that as your hitter. Right? You just push him off, and then you can follow up with whatever ober or Sturts or you let the slice play out, right? Because other times, he might respond to that by trying to fight back, and then you have to work Indes with some kind of snap in or some kind of other action. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, so in those moments, that might be something to consider thinking about. So we're like right here. So like and that really works when you have him backed into a corner because he doesn't have anywhere to go with his blade. So you can just basically, like right here, instead of trying to hit with the top third of your blade, you saw how high his point went in that moment? Watch his point. Right there.
Yeah,
his point is here.
Right.
And so if you just put your arms, obviously from this, like now you can't because you don't have any weight forward. So there's no way for you to shoot from here. It would take, but if you saw that where he was and you start pushing him back and now you get a little closer and now right there, you see how now your weight is forward?
Right.
And so if you catch his point here high, you can just send the Bleiben, not trying to hit, but you can either make him sniff his sword, right? Stick, like put the strong of your blade with strong structure, control, push him back, push him to the side, and then you can take an ober or whatever off of that.
Right.
Right. All right, let's move on. I don't even know what happens here because the judge is. Oh, looks like. Oh, that looked like a really good set, and that looked like a good wind to plow on the withdrawal as well. So good work there. So was that score? Who was that scored for?
That was scored for me.
Okay, yeah. It looked like again it was just that provocation. Set. Provocation with the set, and then catch instance of motion, work Indes, and hit Zek to the hands on the left side. That looked good. So now I'm looking at barring again. Now I'm looking at slicing. That time he just looks like he caught you not knowing what was happening, right? So did he? It's hard to see when he goes because the judge is right in line with him.
Right.
But I want to see if I can't see what did he go Indes or did he go in the bore off of what you gave him? So he's there. So you're just a little low. Your point was just a little low.
Right.
Too close. So right there, you see how you drop your point? You're kind of
I don't know why I retreated here. I should have just stayed where I was.
You could, and kept your sword strong, and then maybe either, like I said, I mean, well, hopefully maybe now having this idea of slicing in at the neck rather than slicing equals hand trucking, right? That you can still slice even if their hands are low. You don't have to try and control their hands and use that. Like you can just slice in at the neck. So maybe that'll give you it'll give you another tool to use in those moments, and maybe having another tool will give you something to do before you think I'm just going to back up.
Right.
But yeah, So what happens is as soon as you back up, you drop your point, and
Yes.
that invites him to go again. And so, if you're going to reset all the way out into the Sufeshten,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or if you're going to do that, then what should you be thinking?
Well, usually when I'm dropping the point, I'm trying to steal a little bit of distance without them realizing it.
Right. Well, so that works if you're on the offense.
Right, but in this instance, I backed up, so.
That's right. Yeah. So that wasn't particularly useful. So if you're dropping the point, you're inviting them to go,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what you might think is, depending on how fast he goes, if I can drop my point and get him like as a provocation for him to hit Indes, then maybe I take him plow. And maybe if it's at this distance, I know that he has to shoot to get to me. So
Right.
maybe I take him plow with the intention of slicing to the hands in this case, because he's going to be extended, because he's trying to thrust me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to thrust weakly to cut around, right? So if I'm dropping the point, I'm thinking I'm going to take him plow, slice as he enters. If I bring my sword back to my shoulder, I might do the same thing, or I might just cut Zorn and then Zek to be like do a tware under his cut around. Because a lot of times when these guys are shooting from that distance, the reliability of the thrust landing is low enough where they're probably going to go for the cut around regardless.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Ben doesn't usually go for the cut around. He is 100% committed on that vor action that he does, where it's like his whole body is
he's trying to thrust. He's
colliding
like,
into me. Yeah.
right, and that's and what that comes from is it comes from a deep knowledge of what exactly his distance needs to be, and what exactly your bind configuration needs to be for that action to be reliably successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, those are the best people to manipulate that way, right? Because if they know exactly what it takes for that thrust to work, I mean, on the one hand, it sucks because if they do it, that's probably because they think they can, and if they think they can, it's probably because they know they can, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, if you can trigger it, now you have that under your control. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so now you can take him plow and slice before he does anything, right? And I say slice because I'm expecting his hands to go high, but if his hands are at chest level, then you take him plow and you just finish. You just seek with the short edge or the point,
Right.
right? But it depends on, at this distance, I'm thinking his hands are going to be, his hilt is going to be at shoulder level, because he's going to want all of the reach that he can get to be able to hit you.
Right.
So taking a plow and then coming up under the arms to push them out of the way, and then you just get you get a slice or whatever, snap, and depends on what he gives you after that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a cut around, then you just hand truck him. But let's see. So you invite that, and he goes, and then. So what am I going to say to this?
Well, I'm leaning back too much, so my posture isn't great.
Sure. The taker and Kron here. Is there good? Is there bad? Why did you do it?
Well, I did it because he was coming in fast and high, and I just needed to get it out of the way real quick before I can cut under. I know reliably that once he comes in, he's going to collapse distance real quick, and
Right. So maybe if you knew that you were going to trigger that set from him with your motion of pulling your sword back, pulling your body back, and kind of leaving yourself that opening, maybe you might think, I'm going to take this. If he bites, I'm going to take it and plow. But this seems to me like it's an O-ship parry.
mm,
How Meyer would describe like an O-ship parry.
right.
Just like, this is a parry that you have to make because you don't know what the hell happened. That's not to say that Kron parries are always O-ship parries, right?
Mm.
Sometimes Kron parries can be great. If I'm expecting a reliably committed cut, so like for instance, if I whiff a cut, if I whiff a cut and then I want you to knock Ryzen,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how I expect you to knock Ryzen, if your knock Ryzen is cut, I will often go to cron and then cut around, or go to cron and then cut under.
Right.
If I think that your knock Ryzen is going to be a Shisen, then I'll take and plow. Right. So I'll like whiff a cut, and then if I think that you're going to cut me, I'll go to cron and cut under. If I think that you're going to Shisen, I'll go to plow, and then I'll try and seek with the short edge.
Gotcha.
But again, all of that is mitigated when you say like, okay, I was in the Krieg, I dropped my sword, right? I was in the Krieg, I dropped my sword. I'm not saying I'll never do that. I'm saying if I do that, it's because I'm inviting him. And if I'm inviting him, I know what I'm inviting.
Yeah.
And I know how I'm going to deal with it the moment it happens.
Right.
Right. All right. That's the last exchange of that. Yeah, and so that's the match there. So yeah, and obviously, well, so tell me about the tournament overall. Tell me how you did, like beyond, like we looked at a lot of fencing already today. We talked about a bunch of stuff. So just sort of break down the tournament experience, and then how you did, and then sort of what you did to prepare for it, and then how well what you did prepared you for it.
Yeah. So I didn't train for the tournament specifically. I think I shot you over my schedule before, but I just have like the handful of things that you told me to do, and then I just cycled through them every day.
Right on.
Right. And I work from home, so I'm lucky in that aspect. So I normally when I go in the backyard, I train for the length of a song. So I put on my headphones, and the song is usually between like 3 to 5 minutes. And then those 3 to 5 minutes, whatever is on the calendar for that day, like that's what I'm wholly focused on. If it's the first session of the day, so I do this multiple times throughout the day. So if it's the first session of the day, it's primarily focused on like just like the sequence, just making sure that like my feet are in the right place, my hands are moving, the fucking cross guards in the right location, all of that. And then in sessions later on, I'll add like a timing element to it, right? So either I'll use the swinging Pel. If I'm practicing Shisen, I might practice Shisen with the swinging Pel for accuracy, right? So I'm following it, trying to hit it as it's passing by, or as it's coming towards me, right? I also have like a random timer, so between 3 to 10 seconds it'll beep, and then
Nice.
If I'm practicing, if I'm practicing like my takers, I try to time it to that.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Do you do take thrust?
Yes.
Yeah. So you practice that as well.
Right. You're right. So when I'm just practicing the sequence, first I do just the take, and then once I get to like 10, 20 reps, then I do the take and then the hit right after. So it's like one in.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That's such an important thing. Yeah. So I'm glad that you're keeping track of that in your training. So you had this tournament, and you for those of you who didn't catch the outcome, this is the gold medal match. So you ended up taking silver in this tournament.
Right. Yeah, we didn't get to it, but by the third match, like the whole room is quiet, but you can audibly hear me breathing very heavily.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to tell you that the only real way to deal with that is to do 30 minutes of steady state 3 times a week. But that's the answer. Like that's
right. Yeah, it's just for me, I know exactly why I gassed out, and this particular tournament. So most tournaments for like a gold medal match, you don't go to multiple rounds with unlimited time, right? There are some that do go to multiple rounds, but when they do, it's like a very short, finite amount of time, and it's more of
Yeah.
like a spectator kind of
And so,
thing.
yeah, and some of those are spread over the course of, the tournaments themselves are spread over the course of days, and so you're not, you have lots of recovery time, and you have lots of opportunity
Right.
to regroup and stuff. So this is
Yeah.
just a day-long tournament,
Yeah, this was a day-long tournament, and because it's a gold medal match, I'm not holding back anything. When I'm
right?
fighting in pools, I am. When I'm fighting in pools, I'm like going at like 70, 80%. You
Sure.
know, especially if I probably shouldn't think of it like this, but if I'm guaranteed to go into elims, right, then for me pools is more of just like a warm up.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily problematic for you to think about it that way. I will say, I look at my son for example. Uh, he has um, he has 3 losses on his record this year for his wrestling career.
Mm,
Two of the losses were he was out wrestled by a guy who's just more technically skilled than he is. Um, and so like anything can happen on the mat, and you try your hardest, and he could pull. You know, the second match with that kid, he actually got out of the first period with the score tied. Which is awesome, right? Because this kid doesn't lose hardly ever.
right,
Um, you know, uh, but the first match that he lost this season was to a guy that I think he went in with the expectation of beating, because it's kind of he was kind of a, a, a a disciple of that doctrine of,
mm,
if I'm guaranteed to go, then I'll take it easy. And
right,
I'm not saying the guy didn't earn the win, and I'm not saying that the guy couldn't have beat him, but Tommy went in with the wrong mentality.
okay,
Is the bottom line, right?
right,
Which is like, at the end of the day, every match is its own match. You
mm,
know, you know what I'm saying? And
right,
you don't win or lose. And really, you don't win or lose because of mindset, or because of you were taking it easier, you lose because something they did was something that you weren't prepared for.
right,
That's what it boils down to. So, but I don't think, I think there's the long game of the strategy of, like, I don't want to blow my load, my physical one or my mental one, right? Like,
right.
it's exhausting if you're trying to catch all these little details. Holy crap, that takes a tremendous amount out of you.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I read this article a while ago that talked about chess players when they're competing, they burn like 10,000 calories just sitting there,
Yeah, and
and
I don't know how legit that is. Like, that sounds like
and probably not, right? Probably not exactly 10K, but pretty dang close, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Cause
I mean, I just know what fatigue looks like, and I'm playing. Sometimes when I'm playing fighting games online, I start sweating in a way that I don't think I've ever sweat fencing. You
mm,
know, like,
yes,
I'm just saying, the way that the bacteria interacts with my sweat and creates the smell.
right.
That's why
It's
they call them sweaty gamers.
That's funny. I think the only game to ever make me sweat is Smash Brothers. Like I will play any game just completely normal, casual, but the moment I start playing Smash Brothers, one round in, and I'm just soaked.
Yeah, we'll have to put that to the test when you come up here next month.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, so you came in second at this tournament. How many competitors were there?
Um, there were. Let's see. I think Paul said there were between 40 to 50.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then you also you were at a tournament maybe a month ago. That was a wild, bonkers kind of tournament, but you also performed really well. This was was it Crossroads who put it on? Uh, or
Yeah.
like
This
the
was this. Yeah. The tournament was called Steel Jam,
Mhm.
and it's primarily run by Crossroads, but it's a collection of various Florida uh, people from different clubs sort of coming together to run, a lot of like experimentation kind of stuff while
Yeah,
also helping the local community and like getting everybody trained up for tournaments and things.
yeah,
And that one was, I mean, I had a blast, but the finals for it were a bit silly.
sure, whatever.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's like, so, but like the nature of that one was like, it was mixed weapons, but it wasn't even like you were locked in. Like, people were just fencing with whatever
right,
they
right.
wanted to.
Yeah,
Any given moment, were you locked in when the match started, or how did that work?
Yes. So basically, you, for the finals anyway, you had a round in which one person picked the weapon set. We had a round where the other person picked a weapon set, and you had a round where the judges picked out of a hat. And the picked out of the hat was very silly.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine. I imagine.
Yeah.
But you also ended up performing not particularly poorly for that tournament as well, right?
Right. I mean, I didn't do as great as I had hoped, but also I was fighting Mike Roth, who was as like one of the best hemists in America as far as like one-handed weapons were concerned, and most of our matches were one-handed against him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for me, going to a tournament is a way for me to learn a lot, right?
Sure.
You end up you end up getting into like weird situations with people that you never see before. It's like, why would that person ever do that?
Yeah.
But now that I've been hit by that, I'm ready for it.
Right. Or at least you're ready to do the work that it requires to be able to be ready for it.
Right.
All right, man. Well, always super, super excited to see all of the progress that you've made, and the level of detail that we're being able to skip in these video reviews at this point, right, is really, it really demonstrates the degree to which you've really internalized so much of the work, so much of the framework and the theory. And we kind of brushed on strategy today, like those little moments of like, that is sort of a cue for me to start to think differently about this moment or what I should be doing.
Right.
And then hopefully and then some technical stuff that you can look at. You can refer to the videos that I showed that, on my channel or whatever, for those reps or whatever. But all right, man. Well, thanks so much for the time, and look forward to seeing you in a month or so, and watching you fence in my tournament.
Hell yeah. I appreciate you.
Go. Yeah. All right, brother. Take care. Thanks everybody.